So there is no choice but to improve government schools in India, I think, because in the last village there is not enough incentive, there's not enough income for the parents to pay for a private school. Although private schools are expanding, they're expanding with a particular section of the population, the top 20% of the population. The bottom population whose landless laborers are never going to be able to afford to send their kids to a private school. I think I always knew that I wanted to do something in development. I come from a family in which 2 generations ago my grandfather was one of 11 children, and only 4 got educated and went up to college, because each person who went to college, 2 other people used to work and support them. And I saw the difference. My father is one of 54 first cousins. I saw the difference in the families just because of the opportunity that education provided to some strains and didn't provide to other strains. And there was no genetic difference between any of the 11 brothers and sisters. The only difference was the opportunity that was afforded to them. And that always frustrated me, that just because you have more opportunity, then you can do better. It didn't make any sense to me. So this is something I always wanted to do. And it was just a question of, I come from a typical middle class family. So I wanted to do this in college, but father said, then who's going to earn money? So then I went and did my CA. After that, I again wanted to do it. And again, I said, you can't sustain yourself. So how will you manage? And then I just realized at the age of 30 that if I don't do it now, then worse, it's going to get more and more difficult later on. I'll have a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage to pay, and I'll never be able to do it. So better to just dive in and do it. And I'm very glad I took that decision at that age, because then you start reorganizing your life and your needs around lower pay. So when I came to India in 2001, there were 87 million children in India who were out of school. It's a huge number. 87 million is more than the population of Germany, France. And all the NGOs were basically working on a small scale to put 20 children into school, 30 children into school. But really, 87 million can't be done by non-profit world. It has to be done by the government. So in the last 10 years, there's been a huge move towards, enrolling children in schools, expanding the budgets for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, getting the right to education bill in place, getting a national curriculum framework in place. And so today, for example, there are only 13 million children out of school, which is a large number, but still substantially lower than 87 about 10 years ago. So I think the government has moved hugely in terms of providing quantitatively the schools, the teachers, and some basic materials. I think now there's a second generation of reforms which is required, which is in terms of quality. Government schools are still not delivering at the quality at which they potentially can. But I think that is now the agenda now, as to how do we deliver really results which are outstanding for children who come to government schools. The faith in the public school system is much lower than it should be, because performance is lower at the moment. There needs to be a lot of customization, because managing a school is like managing a small business. You have 4-5 staff typically in a government school, plus you have about 250 children in the average school. And so managing that group, managing the parents of that group, managing the budgets, managing quality, it's really like a small, it's like a small shop or a small business to be run. And but the principal of the school is typically not trained to do that. He's only trained to teach science or trained to teach language or maths in 5th standard. And in the government system, you've not retrained. So just imagine if in your engineering factories, you're trained as an engineer, but you're not trained as a manager, and the engineer itself becomes the head of the factory and suddenly has to handle sales and everything. It's not going to work. Similar thing is happening in India, which is why we focus on school leadership training, saying that how do you take a good teacher who's motivated, but then give them the additional skills to manage the teacher politics and build a team, to manage the community and the parents and get them enthusiastic and contributing to school, to manage erratic children and dropouts, to manage budgets and planning, to manage their own administration. These are all different skills from managing a classroom in 7th standard. So basically, if you go to a small village school, the principal is practically like a king, because no one is really coming to inspect you. Once in maybe a year, someone might come. So if you wanted to do positive things, like for example, you came to school on time, you painted one wall with some community contribution, you got an additional youth volunteer to teach in the school after school hours, you got a mother's group together to help the young children and volunteer. Nobody can stop you. Because it's all part of the policy now that you're supposed to do those things. The thing is that it's not actually got implemented as yet, because the policy gets decided somewhere and then by the time it reaches the principal and all the politics, it never quite reaches there. So I think just helping principals see role models of schools like this, where within their peer group itself people have done this, and then giving them ideas as to what they can do. There are at least 70-80% of government school principals. I've met like more than 500,000 principals in the last 10 years. And across Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, UP, Bihar, I've seen there are a lot of good people in government who just, sitting in a village, you don't have access to what are the ideas going on in the world out there. More and more corporate foundations, more and more non-profits are coming to work with government to try and see how to improve it. And government, the amount of money that they are able to spend, no non-profit, no corporate foundation can ever spend close to that sort of money. So I think increasingly, however, government is going to go into more and more PPP models, public-private partnerships, to engage with people with technical skills. After all, when you're building a dam, you engage with the L&T. When you're building a road, you engage with a party who's strong at building roads, right? You're engaging with the technical skills because you can't have all the technical skills inside the public works department. You're engaging with various partnerships. You're engaging with technical consultants. The education department, I think, will now start doing that because there's a lot of technical skills in the universities, in non-profits, in several organizations. And at the moment, it's difficult to partner to bring in those skills, but I can see that change is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And so organizations like us, I think, will be much more part of that revolution. We work with a very small group of headmasters. We work with only 1,000 headmasters. The government has 1 million headmasters. But in that group, when we work over 2 to 3 years, we see at least 80% of headmasters where there's a big shift in their attitude. There's a much more positivity. There's much more peer learning. There's much more proactiveness. There's much less complaining. And they're doing stuff. And more importantly, they're happy that they're doing stuff. It's sort of a self-propelling thing because suddenly now, instead of coming and, normally in a peer group, the discussion before the program would be, "Arey yaar, ye scheme nahi chalti hai, isne ye bhujwa diya, usne wo kar diya," all negative thoughts. Now when you're coming and say, "Maine apne school mein ye kiya, tumne kya kiya?" And this guy will say, "Acha, maine mahilaon ke liye ye karwaya, maine youth ke liye ye karwaya." So you're getting a more positive discourse going amongst the group. And we all want to show that we are capable of something. I've had a principal who was going to school and he saw someone else's school and he said, "Inhone itna kiya hai, to mujhe to isse zyada karna hi padega." So when India wanted to build dams, we went and, talking about the 60s, we went and set up 4 IITs. The purpose was we had to create the engineers in order to create the big industries and stuff like that. Otherwise, we'd have been constantly dependent. Then we realized that we needed to get managers in place. So we went and set up the 4 IIMs and said, okay, that's how we'll create the managers and create the new organizations and the private sector of the future. I think a third revolution now, if we really want to improve the schools of the future, we have to set up academies in every state, like the IITs and IIMs. Today, if my daughter wants to go and become a principal of a school, where can she go and get trained? If she wants to become an engineer, she knows where to go. If she wants to become a doctor, she knows where to go. If she wants to become a manager, she knows where to go. But if she wants to become a school leader, is there an iconic institution that the state has started, which is where we all go? No. So our simple one-line business plan when we started 6 years ago was basically saying what IITs did for engineering and IIMs did for management, can we do for school leadership? By setting up some iconic institutions which then have young people who say, मुझे कुछ देश के लिए करना है और इस संस्था में मैं जाऊँगा. So, fight with your parents saying, I don't want to do engineering, I want to become a school leader and therefore train in this and then go and sit in a school and transform the school over the next 20 years.